too many or just not having two people back, rushing up to the ball instead of getting back, and then just on missed shots.
The late afternoon sun poured like liquid gold through the wide windows of Carver Hawkeye Arena, filling Coach Lisa Bluder's office with the kind of fading light that always carried a bittersweet weight, as though the day itself understood that something important was coming to an end. And across from her sat Caitlin Clark, the player who had not only redefined Iowa basketball but had redefined Lisa's own understanding of mentorship, legacy, and the bond that forms when two lives intersect at just the right moment. What began as a relationship between coach and player, structured around drills, film sessions, and scouting reports, had matured into something far deeper, an unspoken connection that carried them through triumphs and heartbreaks alike. And now, as they faced their final conversation together, the air felt thick with both pride and grief, as though neither woman was ready to accept that this chapter was ending. Lisa's weathered hands rested on her desk, the same desk that had witnessed countless recruiting pitches, disciplinary talks, and celebratory moments over her 24 years leading the Hawkeyes, and her eyes, steady but glistening, held a mixture of emotions that Caitlin had rarely seen, an authority softened by something tender, something vulnerable. Caitlin, who had walked into this meeting expecting a formal exit interview, something procedural, a polite closure before she fully turned her focus to the WNBA, sensed instantly that this would be different. The gravity in Coach's voice and the way the silence seemed to stretch in the room told her that today would not simply be about next steps, but about something deeper, something that had been waiting to be spoken for years. The office itself seemed to play its role in this theater of farewell. The distant echoes of basketballs bouncing in practice gyms, the muffled footsteps of trainers closing out their day, the hum of the air conditioner blending with memories of late-night strategy sessions, post-loss consolations, and the fiery pep talks that had sparked impossible victories. Photos of past teams lined the walls, trophies gleamed in muted gold, and every frame seemed to whisper fragments of history. Reminders that Lisa had been here long before Caitlin and would remain long after, yet also that Caitlin's presence had permanently altered the legacy of this space. Finally, Lisa leaned forward, her voice steady but low, as if afraid that saying the words too quickly would shatter something fragile in the air between them. Before we talk about your future, I need to tell you something about your past, something I've never shared with you, something I think you deserve to know now that our time together is ending. Caitlin blinked, caught off guard, her heart quickening with that strange mix of curiosity and unease, and for a moment, she was no longer the poised superstar used to the brightest arenas, but the same girl from West Des Moines who had once walked nervously into this office as a recruit. She remembered vividly her official visit as a high school senior, the campus tour, the locker room introductions, the feeling that this place could be home, and most of all, the way Lisa had looked at her not just as a player who could score points, but as a young woman carrying something bigger inside her, a hunger that went beyond basketball, a restlessness for greatness. Now, years later, with that same gaze locked on her, Caitlin realized there had always been something unspoken beneath their relationship, some unacknowledged current shaping their bond, and perhaps today she would finally understand it. Lisa's fingers fidgeted with a stack of papers, a nervous gesture uncharacteristic of her usual calm, and then she began to speak, telling Caitlin about the early days of her recruitment, about the behind-the-scenes sacrifices and decisions that Caitlin had never been aware of, about how close she had come to never wearing an Iowa jersey at all, and about the lengths the program had gone to ensure she would not only choose Iowa but flourish here. She revealed how staff members had fought for scholarship resources, how alumni had been quietly rallied to show support, how the entire culture of the program had been reshaped to prepare for the arrival of a generational player, how Caitlin was not just recruited, she was entrusted with a future. And then, more personally, Lisa admitted the burden she had carried, that she had doubted, not Caitlin's talent, which was undeniable, but whether she could allow herself to risk the vulnerability of caring so deeply for a player again after decades of heartbreaks, transfers, injuries, and near misses. Yet, from the moment she saw Caitlin's determination, she had felt something awaken in her, something she had not felt in years. A belief that this young woman was not just going to change games, but change lives. As Lisa spoke, Caitlin felt her throat tighten, tears threatening, because suddenly the last 4 years reframed themselves in her memory. Not just the buzzer beaters and the record-breaking nights, not just the media storms and the pressure of carrying women's basketball into a new spotlight, but the quiet moments Lisa had been there for. The private talks after a tough loss, the texts reminding her to breathe under the weight of national expectations, the belief in her not just as an athlete, but as a human being who sometimes doubted herself. What Caitlin realized in that moment was that Lisa had not only been her coach, but her protector, strategist, and silent witness to her transformation from teenager to national icon. The locker room speeches, the sideline embraces, the long flights home after tough defeats, all of it had been infused with a layer of intentional care she hadn't fully recognized until now. And Lisa, for her part, finally admitted that Caitlin had given her something priceless in return. Renewal, a second wind in a career that was nearing its twilight, proof that even after decades in the game, a coach could still be surprised, could still be moved, could still have her faith in the power of mentorship restored. What nobody outside that office knew was how much both women had given to each other. How Caitlin had been the player Lisa didn't know she needed, and Lisa had been the steady anchor Caitlin didn't know she would lean on so heavily. The silence that followed the revelation was thick, not empty but full. The kind of silence where truth finally has room to settle. Caitlin finally spoke, her voice breaking slightly as she said, "I wouldn't be me without you." And Lisa, her own composure cracking, replied, "And I wouldn't still believe in all this without you." In that exchange, unpolished and raw, lay the essence of their journey. That basketball had been the medium, but love, trust, and shared sacrifice had been the substance. Outside the office, life went on. Janitors swept floors, young recruits dreamed of their futures. The arena waited for its next game, but inside, two women sat suspended in a moment that transcended sport, teacher and student bound by something beyond wins and losses. Years later, fans would remember Caitlin's records, her dazzling threes, her WNBA ascension. But for her and for Lisa, what would remain most vivid was this quiet April afternoon when the true meaning of their journey was spoken aloud. And in that truth, they found closure, gratitude, and a sense of eternal connection that no season.
Wale on the drive-in. Rebound to Lloyd, and now the Aces trying to push once again. Counts pass to Chelsea Gray. Right-handed layup, good. She got it.
The afternoon light slanted gently through the windows of Coach Lisa Bluder's office at Carver Hawkeye Arena, painting the walls in a glow that seemed almost symbolic of the moment unfolding, as if time itself slowed to witness the final conversation between a coach and her star player, Caitlin Clark, whose journey through Iowa had already become the stuff of legend, yet whose deeper story was only now being revealed. Caitlin sat across from the desk that had once been the place where she had committed her future to the Hawkeyes, the place where her teenage certainty had met a coach's wisdom, but now it had become a space of farewell, of truth-telling, of handing over the unspoken pieces of a legacy. Coach Bluder leaned back, her hands folded over a worn manila folder, its edges frayed from years of handling, and Caitlin could sense instantly that what lay inside was no ordinary collection of papers, but something carrying the weight of sacrifice, strategy, and love. "Caitlin," Coach began, her voice softer than usual, but still carrying that steady authority that had guided her teams for decades. "I need you to understand something about how we built this program around you. It wasn't just about recruiting a talented player. It was about recognizing that you had the potential to change everything, not just for Iowa, but for women's basketball as a whole." With those words, she slid the folder open, revealing pages filled with her handwriting, notes, diagrams, reflections, and what seemed to Caitlin like the blueprint of a vision she had never fully realized she was part of. As Caitlin's eyes scanned the notes, she saw evidence of what Lisa was confessing. Offensive schemes rewritten from the ground up to suit her style of play, recruiting philosophies shifted to attract teammates who would complement her unique gifts, even strength and conditioning regimens redesigned to amplify her endurance, and shooting range, all carefully orchestrated not just to maximize wins, but to create the perfect environment for her to flourish. The magnitude of it was staggering, because while Caitlin had always known her coach believed in her, she had never imagined that the very foundation of a long-established program had been restructured with her at the center. Then came the revelation that left Caitlin speechless. Lisa admitted she had turned down career-defining opportunities elsewhere, jobs that could have elevated her personal legacy, because she refused to abandon Caitlin in those crucial 4 years. She knew continuity was essential, that Caitlin needed the same guiding hand, the same voice in her corner to help her realize her potential without disruption. For a moment, the silence in the room was heavy, filled with the weight of sacrifice that no statistic or highlight reel could ever capture. Caitlin's voice cracked as she whispered, "You never told me any of this, why?" Lisa's response came with a knowing smile, one born from decades of experience and humility, because that's not what mentorship is about. True mentorship isn't about credit or recognition. It's about creating the conditions for someone else to succeed, and then stepping back to watch them soar. It was in that moment Caitlin realized the full truth of what her coach had been for her. Not just a strategist, not just a motivator, but someone who had quietly chosen selflessness over ambition, who had embodied a love-based form of leadership that prioritized the flourishing of another. From the folder, Lisa pulled a letter written 4 years earlier after Caitlin's freshman season, and as she began to read it aloud, her voice wavered with emotion. "Dear Caitlin, if you're hearing this, it means our time together is ending, and you're stepping into the next chapter. Coaching you has been the greatest privilege of my career, not because of the records we've broken, but because I've watched you grow into the woman you were always meant to be. You came to Iowa an incredibly talented player, but you're leaving as something greater, a leader, a role model, someone who understands that true greatness isn't measured in statistics, but in the positive impact you have on others." Tears streamed down Caitlin's face as she listened, because suddenly the countless practices, the pep talks after painful losses, the moments when Lisa had pushed her harder than anyone else, all took on a new dimension. They were not just coaching tactics, they were part of a careful, intentional nurturing that had shaped not only her career, but her character. And then, setting the letter aside,